Today, we honor another enduring tradition by presenting an honorary doctorate degree from Western Washington University, made in recognition of exemplary contributions to humankind. I invite Mr. Timothy Egan to please come forward. Dean Carbajal and Dean Smith, please step forward to assist me in the awarding of the degree. As a young man growing up in the Pacific Northwest, Tim Egan discovered two great passions: a love of the written word and a reverence for the epic natural and human landscapes of the American West. Those twin springs of inspiration have produced a body of work that brings to life the ancient relationships between people and the land and deepens our appreciation of the lessons the past can teach us about living well in the future. It was fitting, Tim, that you got your big break in journalism as you were covering the Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989, sitting in a fisherman's spare bedroom while writing for the front page of the New York Times every day is something you were made to do. Since then, you have won acclaim reporting for the Times on a wide range of issues, sharing a Pulitzer Prize in 2001 for your work on the series How Race is Lived in America. As a regular columnist for the Times online newspaper, you provide our nation a distinctly Western perspective on American life. As a regular contributor to the BBC Radio, you represent that perspective to the world. Your extraordinary talent for combining deep research with compelling human narratives is also on display in your critically acclaimed books. Your national award-winning work about the American Dust Bowl, The Worst Hard Times, is history at its most engaging. It masterfully tells a story of America's greatest environmental catastrophe through the daily lives, hopes, and struggles of ordinary people. Likewise, your book, The Big Burn, describes the rise of the Forest Service from the ashes of our nation's greatest wildfire and the famous and not so famous individuals who helped shape the conversation about land use in the West that continues to this day. Tim lives in Seattle with his wife, Joni Balter, a political columnist and editor for the Seattle Times, who joins with him here today. For your award-winning contributions to the literary legacy of the West and the national dialogue on issues ranging from race to politics, it is our great privilege to honor you this morning. On the recommendation of the faculty of Western Washington University and by the authority vested in me by our Board of Trustees, and in conformity with the laws of the state of Washington, I confer upon you the Honorary Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, with all the responsibilities, privileges, and honors thereto pertaining. Congratulations. The deans will provide your close. We also have the citation for you. And here's your doctoral degree. I'm also very pleased to announce that Tim agreed to be your commencement speaker, Dr. Egan.
Now I can get that dinner reservation when I say this is Dr. Egan calling table for 4. Thank you, President Shepard and Brad and Brent, and conferring this honorary doctorate on me. Though in all due respect, I'm reminded of this wonderful scene from the movie The King's Speech, which last year you may recall won the Academy Award for Best Picture. Remember in the movie, the voice coach, a gentleman named Lionel Logue, will not accept pretense or title. He calls the prince Bertie instead of Your Royal Highness. And in the best line of the film, he dismisses the doctors who've been giving the prince royal advice. Among the advice of those doctors is, smoke more cigarettes. It'll help with the stuttering. So the voice coach Lionel Logue says of those doctors, they're idiots, And the prince says, "But they've all been knighted." And Logue says, "Well, that makes it official." So, with this honor, count me among the knighted idiots. And glad of it, I should say. Graduates, parents, administrators, teachers, students, family, and friends, Vikings, welcome all. And most important, congratulations. You did it. You did it through the worst economic times in 70 years. I wrote a book called The Worst Hard Times. This is the second worst hard times. And you did it during that time. And unlike my honorary degree, which I am indeed truly honored to receive, you will all be getting real degrees. So yours means something. Mine is the scarecrow equivalent of getting a brain and a diploma. Also, I want you parents, since I'm a parent of 2 kids, to take a bow as well. But a word of caution here. If your parents this weekend have spent too much time recalling their own glory days in college when they were in their early 20s and running around the campus of their choice, just remember the wonderful words of Mark Twain, who said, "Some of my best memories are things that never happened." Today, as most of you know, and if you don't, you will now, or you will tonight, is St. Patrick's Day. To an Irish American such as myself, this is much, much more than a national holiday, and an excuse, of course, to drink Jamesons for breakfast. This is a time to marvel about how a tiny nation produced so many terrific writers, so many wonderful wordsmiths, a nation smaller than the state of Oregon with barely 2 million people. One of those great writers was George Bernard Shaw, and he said this, "An Irishman's heart is nothing but his imagination." And since the Irish had nothing but their imagination, that's why I think in part they were such terrific writers. So using George Bernard Shaw's line as a jump-off point, I've tried to come up with a few words that will outlive today's sunset. And I'm hoping you'll see the sunset today, too. And you know, graduation speakers are supposed to give advice, and I've never felt qualified to give advice. It took me, I'm pained to admit, 7 years to get my bachelor's degree. There was a change in majors, and I think a girl was involved as well. A little bit of the John Belushi plan, but after 7 years I did get my degree. So I'm willing to pass on advice from others, though not necessarily my advice. Others much smarter than I, but I have tested each of these admonitions I'm going to give you here in a few minutes. The first, failure is an option. That's one of the great things about the Pacific Northwest. That is why we have room to fail, which means room to succeed, which is why there are so many creative, positive success stories in this part of the country. We don't care what people think. We're willing to say, why not? The great failures produced by our region include Steve Jobs, who was a Reed College dropout, and Bill Gates, who was a Harvard dropout. And why did Starbucks start here? Why did Jeff Bezos bring Amazon.com here when he had a choice to bring it any other place? Why was Costco hatched in our backyard? Because this is a place that gives people room to fail. This is a place that is forgiving, and ultimately in that room is creative. As an aside, I should say as a writer that I could never write in a good climate. The gray days feed the imagination. Very Irish. Second, find some time every day to do what your heart desires and not just what you have to do. If you're lucky, at some point the two will converge. A friend of mine in college, he gave up his computer programming major and a sure job and decided to become an expert in West African music. He loved the music. It was his passion. He would bore us endlessly with his talk of all the things he picked up about different types of West African music. Everyone said, "What? You're never going to get a job. You're going to waste all your time in college for this West African music?" Well, when he got out of school, this was 20 odd years ago, he got hired by Microsoft. It turned out the company needed one person in America with knowledge of West African music for their audio encyclopedia they were putting together. I should say He is one of the Microsoft millionaires that lives smugly all over Seattle. So as Steve Jobs said, your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life. Third, regrets. Have a few, but don't let them cripple you. And not just those ones on your Facebook page that you should know if you don't now, that every future employer is going to ask you about. Those pictures of you drinking tequila out of someone's navel. They'll actually see that picture. I have some regrets. When I was in college, I wrote a column for the school newspaper praising cynicism. I said the world needed more cynics, but now I know better. Skepticism is good. Cynicism is poison. It's poison in a marriage. It's poison at work. It's far, far better to be curious. My mother passed away recently, just 2 months ago. She was a wonderful woman, a great writer and reader in her own right, and an artist. And just before she died, she had terminal brain cancer. She said, "I'm not afraid, Tim." I said, "Why?" She said, "I have no regrets." I think it's a wonderful goal to die without regrets. Fourth, a corollary to that, grudges. Let them go. I was in a long, festering feud with someone I'd met in college and intensely disliked. I can't use the colloquialism I used for him. But the feud was going on 20 years, and then one day I decided to let it go. I saw my enemy at a party, and I said, you and I should just make up. We should just forget about this whole useless feud thing and let it go. And he looked at me, genuinely puzzled, his face quizzical, and he said, "Oh, have we been in a feud?" I didn't notice. I guess I was the one in the feud. So it turns out my feud was futile. Now, I will make one exception to this rule on grudges: literary feuds. Norman Maclean, the great author of A River Runs Through It, took a very long time to get his first book published. It was called A River Runs Through It. It later starred Brad Pitt in the movie. He was 70 years old when it was finally published. It's a masterpiece. It's beautiful. Most beautifully written novella I've ever read. But he couldn't get it published. It was rejected by everyone. All the major publishers. Finally, a small university press, no criticism of university press, of course, but a university press brought out A River Runs Through It, and it sold more than 20 million copies. He got his revenge when one of those publishers who had rejected him wrote him and saying, "We'll publish anything you write. It doesn't matter. Scribble on a napkin, vomit on a placemat. We'll publish anything you want." Maclean wrote him back and said this: "If you were the last publisher on earth, and I the last writer, that, sir, would be the end of books." So that's my literary exception for feuds. Fifth, keep a core group of friends, for they will stick with you through all the trendy acquaintances, all those shallow electronic digital friends. They will stick with you through ups and downs. But friendship requires work and imagination. You have to nourish those friendships. When I was 21, the age of some of you graduating, unfortunately I lost my two best friends in life, two guys I'd known since high school, and they died 1 month apart in different car accidents. I was absolutely devastated. There was a huge hole in my life, which lasted most of a decade. But from the deaths of these two best friends of mine, I learned to appreciate friendship. And I said then, and I've tried to live up to it, that I would never let a friendship lapse, unless, of course, it deserved to lapse. So I think that's extraordinarily important. 6, anchor yourself. We are, as Americans, a transient nation. There's more than 315 million of us. Think about it. When the U.S. started, there was about 2.7 million. There were 315 million of us. In your time here at Western, some of you have gone abroad. I learned, in fact, to truly appreciate the Pacific Northwest by going abroad and seeing this land from afar. You can live anywhere, of course, and many of you will scatter after today to far parts of the earth. I chose, after living in 2 other places, to come back to the Pacific Northwest, where my mother was born and died, where my grandmother was born and died. Because the more I traveled, the more I realized that every place has something wrong with it. But our good days, when we have them, are better than anyone's good days. The author Wendell Berry said, "You can't know who you are if you don't know where you are." So understand your place, understand its rhythms, its history. We are shaped here today in Bellingham by the volcano of Mount Baker, by the mountain Shuckson, by the big, muscular, magic Skagit River. We're shaped by these islands offshore, and we are shaped by the plates beneath us that, as we all know, could move at any time. Luckily, it didn't happen in your time here. Which leads me to, don't let yourself be disconnected from the earth around you. Hibernate in winter. It's the best time for cooking those 6-hour meals on Sunday. And stay up late and play in the glorious, life-giving light of summer. We are humans, but we are also warm-blooded mammals, part of this ecosystem. The only way to understand that is to stay close to the earth. Even if you don't climb Mount Shuckson or raft the Nooksack, touch the earth, stay in contact with it, stroll along the bluffs in the dead of winter when the sky is the color of a cement basement, feel the wind coming off the sound. Finally, know your story. I'll close on something appropriate for this St. Patrick's Day. 3 years ago, I went to Ireland for the first time in my life. I took the Egan clan, 8 of us, from my then 80-year-old mother to my daughter, who was a junior in college at the time. We were looking for our roots, as people do when Irish Americans go back there, and we found this extraordinarily depressing little town in County Clare, where my family was from. It was a day like today. It was cold, it was wind-raked, rain-swept, and this was a god-awful, depressing place. There were only 2 businesses in this tiny town in County Clare. I swear this is true. One of them was Egan's Pub. And just across the street was the other sole surviving business, Egan's Books and Wine. We had it covered. Later that night, we were dancing to the traditional music. They'll put these signs out in front of the pubs that say trad music tonight. It's terrific. Drinking Irish whiskey and swapping pints of good Irish beer with our beloved, long-lost members of our clan. And my brother turned to me, my brother Danny. We had 7 kids in my family. My youngest brother was Danny. A big smile on his face. Could have been influenced by the whiskey. And he said, "You know, Tim, I finally feel at home." I said, "How so, Dan?" He said, "I'm in a nation of lyrical alcoholics." Well, it made me understand who I am, to see where these people came from. And that's why I think it's important for all of us to know our story. So I hope some of this helps. With that, go forth, grads. Remember that spring days and the rest of your life are just outside the door. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.